It's a fact. Women are less likely to orgasm than men.
You know, how come this doesn't, he gets it, how come I don't get it? What is this insanity?
So sex and orgasm don't always go together. That's like definite.
86% of men sleeping with women reach orgasm. Only 62% of those women say the same.
But when women sleep with women, 75% say they orgasm.
So is the female orgasm really that difficult?
I'm Mona.
And I'm Mae.
I'm a journalist at The Guardian.
And I'm a filmmaker there.
And this is
Vagina Dispatches.
You know what, it's not even about trying to reach the same percentage as men. I feel like a lot of women aren't orgasming as often as they'd like to.
I don't know that there are that many differences between men and women, physically speaking, that gap should be there.
Right. I think part of the reason why this gap exists is because the female orgasm is a lot more ambiguous than the male orgasm, right?
Right, if you're a man, there's semen after you've orgasmed, but it's not so clear for women.
Right, and I wonder if that ambiguity makes us a little bit complacent.
Yeah, but if you look at the statistics for women sleeping with women, they are orgasming more, so maybe it's not a physical difference.
But what even is the female orgasm? We went to Los Angeles to meet Nikky Prause.
She's a neuroscientist who researches the physical and mental states of orgasm.
What actually is an orgasm? How do you define that?
One way you can define an orgasm is by the physiology of it. So there are some highly stereotyped contractions that occur at orgasm. They happen that way every time, so far as we know. And these have been described as 8 to 12 contractions that occur starting 0.8 seconds apart, and then they increase in latency, so it's kind of this like, And you can document that physically.
Nikky measures those contractions through these butt plugs, while her male and female subjects masturbate.
One of the things that's interesting is if you measure men's response, you see these pretty regularly when they say they're having an orgasm. What we're finding in women is it looks a lot more variable. So when women say, yes, I am, we're like, Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. Yeah. And so then the question is, well, then what do you believe? Like, do you take her self-report? Do you look at her vagina? Do you look at her brain?
Nikky and her collaborator Greg Siegel do measure women's brains during orgasm.
You feel like, okay, it's not nice. It's not sexy. That's for sure.
We didn't try to orgasm in the lab, but we did look at arousal.
Mate, the things you make me do.
So this gamma, it's usually happens to more sexual content.
I didn't like that one.
Very few labs have measured the brain during orgasm.
I've actually had my lab stopped from studying orgasm.
Why?
I was at UCLA at the time. To do any study when you're at a university, you have to pass through an ethics board. And they said, you have to remove the orgasm component. We said, that's the point of the study, we're not removing it. It became the second one in the history of the school to be rejected. They basically said, you are not allowed to know.
So if we're not allowed to know what the female orgasm is, how can we figure out how to have one?
There are just people in my personal life that I don't want to know this stuff.
That's fair enough.
I mean, my mum wrote me a text after episode 2 being like, please don't talk about your orgasms.
And here we are.
Here we are. Sorry, Mum.
If that's the case, why do you want to talk about it?
This affects me too, and it's dishonest to just do this whole episode talking about other women as if they're this abstract group, and I'm not a part of it.
In my life, I've had trouble reaching orgasm, for sure.
Yeah, and me too.
I guess I just feel like, so there's like the physical part and then there's the emotional part, and I do feel like they can both affect me.
Yeah, I definitely think it's more emotional for me, and that the things that held me back aren't holding me back as much anymore.
What are some of those things that you felt like were holding you back?
Not wanting to trust someone, like just being in a bed with someone is a position of trust. Like I hadn't come before last year.
That's kind of late.
Yeah?
That wasn't meant to be judgmental, but
Yeah.
I can't imagine if a man hadn't come by the time
God,
that he was like 28, like he would think there was something seriously wrong.
And so would the medical profession. Studies would be written about this man that didn't come until he was 28.
But for some reason, for women, it's acceptable that we've been having sex for however long and you just might not orgasm.
I think that there is some truth to that myth around orgasms being hard for women, but my goal in sexual experiences is pleasure.
I look at people with penises and I think, it's like water for you guys. You just turn the faucet on, orgasm happens, you know? For me, it's not as simplistic.
I was really born to do it, born to orgasm.
In the beginning, orgasm was confusing because I was trying to have vaginal orgasms like all women probably try to do. So I kept expecting it to happen, and then I found, well, it isn't going to happen, so what am I going to do about it? And that's when I figured out, I do my clitoris, you do your penis or your clitoris. And then we make that decision, and then we come together and we can dance as equals, not me lying there expecting to get done.
Penetrative sex alone doesn't usually result in a female orgasm. It only works for about 1 in 4 women.
And that's partly because of the anatomy of the clitoris. This right here is the external glands. The clitoris also has this internal structure.
These 2 legs are called the crura, and there's also the bulbs. Both have erectile tissue that's pretty similar to a penis.
That tissue gets engorged with blood when women get aroused, sometimes tightening up around the vaginal opening.
So for some women, penetration does feel really good because it's hitting the bulbs, while other women prefer external stimulation on the very sensitive glands.
And that elusive G-spot, new research suggests that might just be the internal clitoris too.
We spoke to sex nerd Sandra, who's a sex educator in LA. She knows all about the importance of the clitoris.
All right, have you met... Just a vulva puppet. Whoa. I love having this to show people because this is the clitoral hood. Mm-hmm. A lot of people will pull the clit hood back, expose the very sensitive glands of the clit, and then immediately be like, you like that? You like that? Get turned on, get turned on. And you're like, ah, why are you doing this? So knowing that you can play with the clit through the hood and it's made to protect it. Yeah. That can really up your game on finding your pleasure. Yeah. And so when it comes to pleasure...
Oh my God. Is it a dildo?
This is intended to be a dildo, yes. It's amazing, the shapes. You need to get on the internet. So I laugh because this type of toy, where somebody loves the opening, just to the left and right of the vagina, you have these bulbs of tissue that feel really good when they're played with on a lot of bodies. Instead of going in and out, right? The porn thing, in and out. That's how you do sex. No! You do a clockwise, counterclockwise twirling pattern. Something like this could blow someone's mind and they wouldn't even consider it because they have no idea what's hiding in their own vulva.
How did you get your own education and how did you teach yourself about what feels good to you?
Oh gosh, that's a lifelong experience.
Yeah.
I mean, the first time I was able to orgasm with my own hands, it took a full 3 hours. Different positions, different thoughts, the things I thought of. But you are your own expert for your own body, and what is true to you may not be true to me, but that's okay.
One way to find out what's right for you, masturbation.
But there's a big gap there too. 73% of men masturbate compared to 44% of women. If we're talking about the possibility of orgasming with a partner, it's really hard to communicate what you enjoy if you don't know what you enjoy, right?
I have felt that I don't have the patience for myself to figure out what works for me sometimes. Yeah. Like, it's not as straightforward as I might want it to be. And so I'm just like, maybe I'll just watch Netflix.
But it is trial and error, and I think it does require patience.
I mean, part of the reason that I haven't masturbated as much is because I just haven't found as much porn that I like.
I think there's always this question when you're watching porn of like, are you really having a good time right now though?
Sometimes it's just the logistics of it. You're like, what are you doing down there?
Yeah, exactly.
I can't even
camera angle
see.
Isn't quite
like,
right.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
From a young age, knew to hide masturbation. You know, like get the extra blanket in preschool nap time. I remember that. So I always had shame around masturbation. Not now, because I'm an adult and I do what I want, but
Now we have porn. And so what is porn? Basically, porn is male fantasy. Big dick. And the woman goes, oh, I love it. And it's a myth.
For me, orgasming has a lot to do with my mind. To put the pressure on someone else to be getting an orgasm feels like setting myself up to feel frustrated.
Recent studies suggest sexual arousal is like driving a car. This is called the dual control model.
There's the gas, that's everything around you that turns you on, and then there's the brakes, which can be affected by things like body image, trauma, and anxiety.
We wanted to understand the emotional factors that can keep women like us from orgasming. So we talked to Dr. Offman. She's a sex therapist in New York.
So we're here. I haven't wanted to come to a sex therapist before, but I could say that I've had trouble climaxing in the past.
Has it been consistently difficult?
I do find that it sort of depends on how stressed out I am. And, sometimes I feel like I could be physically close to orgasming, but I feel like I'm always up here, like things are always just moving around up there.
And that I hear from a lot of women, that difficulty being present with themselves and taking their own physical needs seriously enough. I think it's very important for everybody to cut themselves a lot of slack, in that sex is not a performance sport, but it is a way to connect to another person.
In the past, I felt guilty about sex from my upbringing. So I was raised in a household where sex before marriage was wrong. I don't feel good about sex if I think that the person I'm having sex with doesn't care about me.
But do you see that as problematic, or is that just fine?
I think it's problematic if the person does actually care about me and I'm not recognising it.
And why might you not recognize it?
I think because I don't have a very positive view of myself, and so I struggle to believe that a partner would have a positive view of me.
And that sort of gets us to another thing that we talked about earlier, like factors that play into, that may not be directly sexual, but that are part of the more overall personal perception of yourself. I think you should be free to do what feels right for you at the time, and it may change, and you should be allowed to change.
Therapy and masturbation tips aren't everything though. Some women experience sexual dysfunctions which can require physical treatment.
Vaginismus is a condition in which the pelvic floor muscles involuntarily contract around the vagina, which can make penetration extremely painful. Isa Herrera uses physical therapy to treat women who have vaginismus and other pelvic pain.
Take a big belly breath into the vagina, like you're breathing into the vagina. And when you do that, imagine that the pelvic floor muscles are really opening up, like your vagina is a sunflower in the springtime. Blossoming.
Chloe Angyal is a writer who has been getting physical therapy at Isa's practice for 6 years.
I had 6 years of painful sex before I started doing physical therapy.
It takes a long time because there's so much, like the average woman will see maybe 5 to 6 doctors before she gets a diagnosis. Many women are told, have a glass of wine and just relax.
I was told that.
By a doctor? That's shocking.
Yeah.
It's got so many sexist overtones about women being overly emotional
That's all in your head.
crazy.
Yeah,
crazy,
that's all in your head.
basically.
Yeah.
Much of the therapy that Isa does involves slowly reintroducing penetration with these dilators. When someone has vaginismus, can you just not even get that in there?
Absolutely not. Sometimes with vaginismus, I will start with a little Q-tip test. With a little Q-tip. Yeah.
And you can't get a Q-tip in there?
No, mommy, I'll try.
Is there a lot of shame associated with this pain in the women that come to you?
Yes, a lot of shame. A lot of shame is like, I can't pleasure my husband. I can't have sex. And there's so much pressure on them to be able to do that.
You know, I think the flip side of switching from a culture where women are told that sex is bad and dirty and dangerous and they shouldn't be having it, into one where we're told that sex is amazing, fantastic, 100% orgasmic 100% of the time means that it can be very, very difficult to stop and say, this is hurting me, this clearly isn't good, I'm not going to do this right now until I figured out what the hell is going on down there. Sexual health is health, and we're talking about not just physiological health, but emotional health and psychological health. If it had impacted anything else, right, I would have gone straight to a professional. But because it was only my sex life, I waited a really long time.
About 15% of women in the US report having issues with pelvic pain. For many, these symptoms can go undiagnosed for years.
Partly because female pleasure isn't taken seriously, which means it's often on us to work out what feels good. For some women, orgasms just aren't that straightforward.
And that's probably because there's a physical and an emotional aspect to all this.
Right, but you can work on both.
And it's worth trying because sexual pleasure matters, it's part of our health.
For our last dispatch, we speak to our mums,
investigate everything from discharge to menopause,
and find out why we're missing this crucial body knowledge.
I'm hungry.